Hello! So I got these 3 round containers from the dollar store. I'll be focusing on the biggest one today, but they do come in a pack of 3. For the majority of this, I'm using a pasta maker to condition and flatten my clay. Once I had a bigger flat scrap of it, I placed the bottom of my box onto it and traced around. I did this twice so I would have some thickness to the bottom, but also have enough around the edges to actually blend up. Before baking, I used a generous amount of liquid Sculpey to be sure that the clay would adhere to the box. Then bake that so no matter what happens, the bottom of the box would stay on and I wouldn't have to worry about any fingerprints or marks, etc. Oh my god. Alongside baking the bottom, I also pre-baked some seeds for the bun, some faux sesame seeds. All of it except about 5% of it is being done with oven-baked clay. Now let's get started on the inside ingredients. For one, I'm grabbing some tin foil to bulk out the burger portion. So with a long snake of clay and then further adding liquid Sculpey on top of that and covering what is now the bottom of the foil, basically creating a half metal, half clay snake. Adding more liquid Sculpey to the box to add the burger snake of clay in, which is what I will continue to do throughout the process, adding some liquid Sculpey to it and then continuing on. I use multiple tools to blend the bottom of it into the bun, then using a small rolled up piece of tin foil to give it some texture. Rolling out 2 pieces of clay to stick together and cut out what's soon to be a layer of cheese, and then pressing the top half of the box into it so I knew exactly where to cut. Placing it on top of the burger pieces and pressing it firmly into place. Once I've blended it up a little bit, I cut off the excess. I did this quite a few more times until I had 3 good sized pieces of fake cheese to take up a layer. Using a random container, I cut around it twice and stretched the 2 pieces out just a little bit to start my pickle, basically just making it into an oval. As you can see on the left is what it ends up actually looking like, but I stretched them into an oval, as I said, pressed the sides in using the back of my knife and then one of my clay tools that still has a little plastic guard on it, as well as the textured top portion, making a very much not straight line from what I would call the peak of the indents to the opposing peak of the opposite side, then adding a few more in for fun. Now that I had a full clay pickle, I cut them in half in, funnily and ironically enough, hamburger style and one in hot dog style, and then place them both between where the cheese slices met. Taking a break from what's inside for a minute, I grabbed some foam clay. This is basically like the 5% when I said that it's mostly made out of oven bake. This is going to be the air dry. My first time using this actually. I grabbed some tin foil to shape out the base shape of the bun. Like marshmallow. And then grab the foam clay and press it firmly onto the foil, adding and pulling away as needed and then blending it into the bottom portion or the circumference, I guess. The perimeter, and then smoothing it out with some water. At first I had wanted to see if I should pre-place the faux sesame seeds in, but I quickly realized that it would not be working out. Now we're back to the innards. I don't like how that sounds. Using once again another cup to cut around and make a circle shape, as well as a few paint containers to create the textured middle portion of the soon-to-be onion. I traced around the bottoms with a clay tool and then eventually just started making my own circles in and pushing down some a little bit too large peaks as they formed. Then once again cutting this in half. As I added on more ingredients, I also slightly manipulated their shape to make them look more organic, so using my fingers to push some points up and to push some points down. The tomato was definitely the easiest. I just made a circle, cut it in half, and added it on. No texture needed for this one. However, the lettuce more than made up for it. I took a thin sheet of clay, rolled it out even thinner with a clay tool, a very small wood cylindrical clay tool to be sure that I got some very uneven rolled texture on there. Using the actual sharp edge of it, I cut one side in kind of a jagged way to start the shaping, pushing the edges down to flatten them even further, and then reshaping the edges again and again until I was happy with the width, length, and thickness. I placed it onto the box, stretching it out a bit as I went to create even more textured edges. This was definitely the longest step of them all. I went around blending the edges into the box, tearing at the outer edges, and then cutting off the unnecessary bits. Pressing pieces down and moving others up as lettuce is very organically shaped. I went back in with some tools to press holes into certain areas, and then placed the now dried top bun on to see where some of the box was showing through, then continued the process with the lettuce until basically all of the box was no longer showing through. Although some of it was, but I knew that would be an easy enough fix for later. Now it was time to bake. And then it was painting time. For the top and bottom bun I used a butter yellow at first. Then once that was dry, I mixed a brown, orange, and that same yellow together and dabbed it on with a disposable sponge to give it more of a toasted look. Once the bun was dry to the touch, once again, I added the faux sesame seeds on. As this was foam clay, it was easy enough to break the surface of. I used the same pointed tool that I was using for the texture. I pressed it into the clay in a line made of dots, and then used tweezers to add E6000 glue into that line, and then press the seeds into the hole. Continued this until I was done with all of the seeds. I flipped the box over as I was determined to coat as much of each ingredient as possible, top and bottom. The burger got a coat of kind of like a medium brown. And then once that was dry, I used a part of the sponge that I had used earlier for the bun to add a very dark brown, stippled on as if the burger was charred. I don't brag a lot, but I will say that the color I used for the cheese is definitely the best cheese color I could have picked. I did want to make this a little bit less lifelike considering it's picked right out of a cartoon, so I added an orange around the edges of the cheese, almost as if kind of like pop art, kind of. Now I'm just gonna see if I like this. I won't know for sure. You can't even see that. Just like a little shading. I've done this with the right side up for obvious reasons, and not upside down. Onto the pickles though, using multiple greens. A lighter one for the top, like a lime green. A darker one for the outside. And then kind of mixing the two for the inner indents. The onion I made out of a mix of a light and dark purple, but I didn't mix them entirely together, like they weren't completely blended. So some of the brushstrokes would be multi-toned. Once the initial layer was dried, I did use the dark purple that I originally mixed in with light purple and used a very thin brush to add the texture back into it, as well as the outer edge. The tomato was an easy red. Not only is it pukey green, but it's also like touchable. Ugh.
Disgusting!
And then the lettuce, which again was a lime green on the top and bottom. But around the edges and into some of the holes that I had made, I dabbed a little bit of a darker green for that cartoony feel. There were so many paint colors on this thing, I kind of created a small army. All the paint that I've got going. And the palette.
Caked.
I did a little bit of a mix here. I originally made this a regular Krabby Patty, but I wanted to add more to it so I could make it some accessories, namely pickle eyes and legs and feet to be a patty pal. I made the pickle eyes out of foam clay in the same way I previously made the pickles on the burger, just shaped it smaller and like more consistent and also more cartoony. Ah! As those were drying, I mixed up some resin and added a coat onto the entire thing. I added rolls of tape under so the extra resin would drip off instead of pooling. When that was cured, I followed up with a red and yellow puffy fabric paint to to both fill in the holes between any of the ingredients and also act as ketchup and mustard. At this point, those pickle eyes were long dried to the touch, so I did a dry fit and then cut out some small gauged wire and twisted one of the ends into a couple loose loops. I spun the loose loops into the back of the eyes, as I had let this dry face up so the middle and the back were still a little bit tacky. The excess wire sticking out of the back was then pressed into the bun. This makes it so it could be removable, as it was a gift for someone, and if she wanted to put the eyes away, to move it, or just put the eyes away for fun, she could. For the smile though, I used more of that red fabric paint. Kinda looks like Ditto, or like, ew. Finally added resin to the pickle eyes. This is how I have them curing, so that they didn't touch anything. And then the extremities were the last to be added, which if you've seen a Patty Pal, you'd know that they are made from striped straws. I have a vintage diner, like Coca-Cola canister that I save all of my straws in case I ever need one, and today was that day. I turned it around and I just happened to find the exact one that I was hoping for. With some sheer will, I actually got it out. I found a drill bit that was almost the size of the straw and drilled the hole into both sides. I cut it down into 4 pieces and added hot glue into each end. Not accounting for space, so some of it came out, but I did need the hot glue to be in each end so I could place jute wire into it. You could use regular wire for this, but having the jute wrapped around it will give it more of like a texture to stick to, essentially. Leaving a naked wire at the end so I could glue them into place. Place the wire and the tip of the straw through that hole, and then bent the wire one way and then hot glued it into place. Using pliers, wire cutters, I'm not sure what these are called, but using them and my hands, I stabilized it at about halfway through and then bent it. These arms and legs are now posable. Oh. The arms are part of the body. The legs, however, are just sitting on. They are being kept up by the weight of the piece. They can also be put away at a moment's notice. But that is it for today's video. I do hope you guys enjoy, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye, guys.